everyone, I'm Richie and welcome to Helix Cloud Games, and this is SideQuest, a show where we take a step off the critical path and explore more what the video game world has to offer. On this week's show, I'm joined by the host of the Sound Stadia podcast, Mr. Chris.
Hey gamers.
And this week we're going to be talking about Ubisoft and specifically, have they went too generic? But first, quick bit of housekeeping. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that bell icon for notifications when all of our great shows go live, such as Sound Stadia podcast, which goes live every single Monday on YouTube and podcast services, our Thursday night live streams. And if you want to support the channel, you can for as little as 99p by joining our membership, which gives you early access to this very show, massively supports the channel, you get access to our custom emojis and whatnot. If that's not enough for you and you want to join the conversation even further or suggest a topic idea, head down to the description below where you'll find a link to our Discord server. So Chris, Ubisoft are coming a bit of hot water recently with the launch, with the debut of Frontline, Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon. Is it Ghost Recon? Frontline?
Yeah, Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Frontline.
Yeah.
And
the fact that Frontline, Ghost Recon is traditionally a single player experience and they've went Battle Royale.
Yeah, so we touched on it briefly in the podcast, but yes, the reason for this topic is the latest trailer dropped. Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon is going... They haven't said if this is the next entry or it's just like kind of a spin-off, but essentially they're going 102-player Battle Royale with a mode called Expedition Mode where teams of 3 take on other teams of 3 to extract information, intel from the world within. And the dislike to like video, it's basically they've review bombed it almost, and the thumbs up to thumbs down is almost 1 to 4. And Ubisoft since then have actually pulled the closed test beta for the game. And it led to me thinking, and it led to a lot of journalists thinking, in line with Far Cry 6 recently released, and a lot of the other entries they've announced, Ubisoft just becoming a rinse and repeat, stale copy and paste job of themselves. And I think there's a lot of titles coming to Stadia that kind of fit in with that model. And I know you've got a quote from Yves Guillemot to basically say that actually... that's the way the brand's going, and is it a good thing? Are Ubisoft at risk of becoming too stale and or repetitive, essentially?
Yeah. So there's 2 quotes I want to read out. The first one's gone by this Ubisoft CEO, Yves Guillemot, and the second one is by the CFO, when I find the gentleman's name, Frederic Duguet. So apologise for the pronunciations there. So Yves said, "We are building high-end, free-to-play games to be trending towards AAA ambitions over the long term." And Duguet is quoted as saying, We think we have a great opportunity to meaningfully expand the audience of our biggest franchises. So them two, for me, sums up what's happening here with Ghost Recon Frontline. They're taking a franchise and they're moving it into a free-to-play AAA multiplayer experience, which they hope will expand the audience. But hardcore fans of the franchise aren't happy with that, which I totally actually get, because if you're a big Ghost Recon fan, and then you've been told, oh yeah, we are making Ghost Recon games, but it's now going to be just another Battle Royale, and you're just like, well, that's not why I buy Ghost Recon.
Yeah.
But
yeah, it's an interesting one, because I enjoyed Wildlands. Didn't play it to completion, but I did enjoy it. I was put off by the multiplayer aspect, even though you could play it with kind of AI if you wanted to. Breakpoint, I know, didn't land for a lot of people. And then, this is the next entry in the series. And the whole marketing message of switching towards games as a service. And Ubisoft, like, to their credit, they've been great at doing this with the likes of Rainbow Six Siege is in its 6th year. And that goes from strength to strength, that game, even though at its core they've not changed it that much. The Division 2, very well revered. People love playing that game. And in fact, Ubisoft came around and said, well, you know what? We're going to support that game for an entire another year of content because of how well it was received from the fans. And unfortunately, I think at its detriment, that has now made Ubisoft look at, probably in discussion with the shareholders, and say, you know what? We could take a lot of these franchises and just milk them for everything that they're worth.
Well, I mean, the quotes I've just read out were, I think they were part of the earnings calls, and this literally, they're basically saying, we're going to take our franchises and change how we monetize them and change them to reach a bigger audience. Ubisoft, I think, they're looking at the franchise. The thing is, with a AAA single player game, it's a lot of outlay to get the game developed. Then you get a massive spike of finances when it goes, if it lands, and then it dies off.
Yeah.
With persistent online games or multiplayer experiences, you don't get that big spike at the beginning, but you get a constant trickle of funds, which every accountant would probably much prefer. So
it's a risk reward, isn't it? Like genuinely, until the game launches, you really don't know how it's going to be received. And I think the market is so saturated with certain types of games now. It's interesting. So, like, looking at the list of games, just to break down the kind of current releases, we had Hyperscape.
Yeah.
Like, not on Stadia, albeit, but it kind of came and went.
That was one of them games. Like, there was a bit of hype going into it, but then, like, they got to a point, like, did Hyperscape ever come out? Like, yeah. When it came out, I was like, did it? It just kind of completely passed me by when that game launched.
Did it actually get public release? It's hard to even tell, because it is free to play. You know, when that voice in my head, yes, Season 3, Shadow Rising?
Yeah.
But it's a weird one with Ubisoft. There's loads of factors to kind of discuss and go through with it. And like Hyperscape Season 3, apparently, I hear nobody talking about it. Absolutely nobody. And then on the flip side, you've got Far Cry 6 just came out. Moderately reviewed, like good and bad, mixed slate. People have said if you love Far Cry, you like this. But it is essentially rinse and repeat gameplay in that loop. But that's what people like video games. It's comfort food video games.
This is what Ubisoft do. This is when we're talking about Ubisoft being quite generic. They make a franchise. They produce a game and make a franchise out of it. And then every couple of years, they basically take the same concept of the game, put some tweaks in around it, put in a new setting, then release it as another thing. They've done it with Assassin's Creed. They do it with Far Cry. Even Ghost Recon's until recently, that Ghost Recon is basically the difference between Wildlands and Breakpoint is basically the setting. They just change things up, but it still is inherently the same game.
Yeah.
But the longer you do that, I think the more like
fatigue.
Yeah, it is fatigue, but it's also like it's just a trope. It just feels like paint by numbers, really. So sometimes, this is why as much as I do enjoy Ubisoft games, I don't find them that interesting. It's the problem I had with Immortals Phoenix Rising, actually, where after a while, after the initial new gloss of paint on the game wore off, I was just playing another Ubisoft game, and my interest just plummeted, fell off a cliff.
That is a great point. Like, I really enjoyed Immortals Phoenix Rising, but you're totally right.
Up to the point where
Assassin's Creed Odyssey, but with like a cartoon skin over it instead. It's a great point, that one. But yeah, I'm enjoying Far Cry 6, but I'm a big Far Cry 6 fan, and I've admittedly said many times that I love the nature of just going to a checkpoint, clearing it out. That area is now my own. Move on to the next, with a couple of story beats in between. The gameplay is fun. But with Ubisoft, you're totally right, is a lot of these games, I think, they feel fatigued because the art style doesn't really differ. Ubisoft are terrific at sharing assets from studio to studio across the globe, but I feel like they're starting to get caught out now where Hyperscape, even though it's a totally different game to Immortals, it looks the same visually.
Yeah,
I think just like Division and Ghost Recon, there's not really that much at all which differentiates, other than the title, those games.
Yeah, well, what I think sometimes can happen with Ubisoft as well is you get a 12-hour story wrapped up in a 70-hour package. So sometimes the main story beats are so spread out by all the other stuff to do in the world that this is why I think I often fall off on them, because they're spending so much time, as much as the gameplay is fun, collecting things or doing like side challenges and missions and stuff, that you lose track of the main narrative, that these things don't feel properly connected to.
Yeah.
I always go back to the Witcher, The Witcher 3, where I think every side quest felt like just the way the story works in that game. It felt like every side quest was what Geralt would be doing. It's not just because it happens to be there. This is like because part of it comes in with the law of what Geralt is as a Witcher and what a Witcher does. But part of it is where the stories are written, that it feels like, you are this is what Geralt would be doing in these times, and I don't really ever get that with Ubisoft games.
Yeah. A good example I've got of that is the last few missions I've just done in Far Cry 6. One of them was go collect this enemy's truck, bring it to this location, mission done. And the fun part is all the people you kill along the way and extracting it from the location. Yeah. The next mission, like just a few missions along, go get a tank from this area and bring it to this area. And that's just in the last few hours I've played. It's 2 rinse and repeat missions.
The mission is
that engaging.
It's not the mission. The purpose of the mission isn't to tell a story and deepen the lore of this world that you're exploring. It's just to get you to
B.
do something.
It's A to B. It's B to C.
It becomes a task.
Kill a few people in between. Yeah, it does. And part of me enjoys that because it's just that kind of soothing gameplay. Yeah, but when you times that by Immortals, Far Cry, Ryders Republic, Rainbow Six, it starts to get a bit like, all right, I'm not doing anything different now.
The worst game, I think, for that was actually Assassin's Creed Odyssey. Because it had the just procedurally generated missions. Procedurally generated missions are one of the things that I would, if I could, kick out of every single video game. Because they're just pointless. It's just fluff. Like, they're never interesting. There's no heart soul into the writing. It's just generic NPC tells you go to a random location to do a random selection of probably about 4 or 5 different potential tasks. Then report back, and here is random loot.
Yeah, you're completely right.
And that's why I don't think it adds to the game apart from just wasting my time.
Yeah. And that's why looking at like the list of games coming out and the games I've played, like I really, really do love Ubisoft games. However, I would never put them on the same level as I put some of Sony's first party. Yeah. Spider-Man, God of War, Uncharted, Last of Us, Ghost of Tsushima, they are tiers above all of these Ubisoft titles.
Yeah.
I love them all for different reasons, but like you, back to what you said, the stories and all of those PlayStation games I've mentioned, they matter to me. I remember the characters. I remember the chapter beats. Whereas if you tell me half the stuff I did in Odyssey or any other game for that matter,
you're not invested in the story. It's a
game. It's a video.
Yeah,
it's the most gamey video game you could get.
I think the difference is for me, most Ubisoft games, fall into the 7 to 8 out of 10 rating, and I don't think they're ever pushed to try and get into the 9s or 10s. They just feel like as long as the game is competent, that's it, really. I like the Ubisoft games, I really do. I do enjoy them, but they never... I just would love the Ubisoft to go, you know what we're going to do? With this next game, we're going to push into that 10 tier. I'd argue Siege is probably in the 9s or 10s, but that is from the ground up built as a multiplayer experience. And the way it feels to play is fairly unique in the first-person shooter genre. So that they nailed that, but they don't really nail it on single player. They do it well, but they don't absolutely nail it.
Yeah, and you're totally right. It is sometimes the transition between cutscenes. I've said in Far Cry how I actually feel a lot more attached to the character because when you go into base camp, it goes to a third-person perspective, and when you have cutscenes, you see the character you're playing as, whereas traditionally it would just be a faceless, voiceless, like first-person view. A lot of the Ubisoft ones, you're totally right, where it's a cutscene and then you do an A to Z mission. Whereas all the story is lost because of the detachment from that, and I don't know whether that just makes it generic. But looking at the list of games coming up, in Rainbow Six Extraction, the story, my guess, is just going to be there's some alien thing, bust in and get the alien eggs, extract the virus antidote, otherwise, with chaos in between.
This falls in for me, so like the kind of idea where like a game for like a Left 4 Dead or Back 4 Blood, or it's predominantly a multiplayer experience where I think as soon as you have multiplayer in the mix, narrative is always going to take the backseat a bit, because when you're playing with other people, it's harder to get invested in the story of what's going on. But there is exceptions to kind of the generic rule I put out there. So I think Extraction, I would fall in. I don't think Extraction's going to feel generic. I do think if it's Rainbow Six similar to Siege gameplay, but with its own unique spin, I think it'll do quite well.
Yeah. For me, with all of these titles we're looking at, is they're missing that one. Like that story narrative, that really impactful story narrative, and I think the ironic missing thing from this slate of games is, we mentioned the podcast, Splinter Cell. Give me an 8 to 10 hour serious spy stealth espionage, Metal Gear inspired action game where I see cutscenes, I feel emotion, I see his best friend get killed at the beginning of the game, and it's going to tell some kind of like James Bond spy stealth story with great gameplay in between. But another Splinter Cell game, my guess would be generic level, there's your generic boss, go from A to Z, get helicoptered in, do the mission, come out. Like that's what it will look like, unfortunately. Whereas I feel like Ubisoft really need to commit to an IP that's going to be different from the rest of the franchises.
The thing for me is with Splinter Cell, if they put a game, go, you know what, it's going to be somewhere between 10 and 20 hours, single player and narrative driven. You are Sam Fisher. Let's just reboot the franchise. This is Sam Fisher's origin story, sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So we're going to start going forward. You can do that, but then what you could do is you could add a Hitman style sandbox element to it once the story's over to keep this continuous stream of DLC. So with like the World of Assassination, where IO are constantly supporting that, adding new content, new missions, new challenges. So some of these you can build these sandbox worlds in whatever engine they use. So you're Sam Fisher, you're infiltrating it, and you're achieving an objective within there, whether it's assassinating someone, it's collecting a bit of intel, whatever it is. So I think there's an awesome game there, but Ubisoft, it's clear that their focus is more multiplayer experiences because they've literally told us this. I've read the quote already, which I think is just a shame.
It's looking at the list.
They need both for me.
You need that mix, and it's interesting how if you rewind the clock a few years, Ubisoft were definitely, in my opinion, on the upward swing, and EA were getting shit on all over the place for like how bad the practices were. And now I feel like it's almost like the tides have turned, and EA have got a single player story in Jedi Fallen Order. They've got their multiplayer with Apex Legends. They've got the sports franchises churning out the money for them. They've got the indie titles, like Lost in Random, looks great. It Takes Two is a terrific game. That's like 9s and 10s across the board this year. That's a multiplayer co-op, like couch co-op only title.
It's such a unique experience.
There's a broader span of titles.
This is the thing. This is where sometimes I look at Ubisoft and go, you are a business. You feel sometimes a bit too much like a business when you're in the entertainment industry. So I'm sure there's fantastic creative people there, but it feels like some of the games are just lacking that level of creativity, that love, care and attention. It's everything with Ubisoft as a franchise, where you mentioned It Takes Two with EA. That's not a franchise, that's a game. We made this game, this is what it is. Go play it.
And the biggest thing is they all look different.
Yeah, Ubisoft haven't really done that. Everything is... You joke that everything, like, how much are they overusing the Tom Clancy brand? Because almost everything with Ubisoft is Tom Clancy's this, Tom Clancy's that. But everything is a franchise with Ubisoft. But they don't seem to just make these one-off games. It doesn't feel like they have people there. I'm sure they do have people there pitching stuff all the time. But it doesn't feel like someone's gone up to whoever, like Yves Guillemot, and gone, I've got this concept for a game. This is the story I want to tell. This is how it's all going to work. It's a one-off experience and just nailing it. If you look at things like The Last of Us from Sony, that was probably intended as a one-off experience, and phenomenal game.
Yeah. And then it got turned into a franchise. With the list of upcoming titles, let's face it, X-Defiant did not have to be Tom Clancy.
No.
There's nothing about that's Tom Clancy other than it's soldiers.
This is where it's clearly the marketing execs when it's come to the naming. Because marketing execs, they should be involved in the naming of a game. Mm-hmm. But they went, well, the Tom Clancy's brand's really strong for us, so is this a military stylistic game? Yep, it's a Tom Clancy game. Where originally the Tom Clancy brand came from Tom Clancy, who, the author. So, like, a lot of the early games were based on his books. Where something like X-Defiant is completely new. Like, it doesn't feel like it needs that.
Yeah, X-Defiant, in the list of games that we know coming from Ubisoft, that's like the least interested I probably am in them. The fact that the only thing that ties it to Tom Clancy really is the factions, which is what they're using to give their classes. So like the Wolves, the Outcasts, the Cleaners, they're all from other things in the Tom Clancy universe. But when you kind of just like, could you not just make
But
made 4 of your own and make a unique game?
Let us know in the comments, but are these even from Tom Clancy? Or is this stuff that Ubisoft have added into their Tom Clancy's universe? Because these fractions might not even be anything to do with Tom Clancy at this point.
Just like in the games that exist from them. But
yeah.
In terms of the titles, like we joked before, like a few shows we have actually about Skull and Bones should have just been an Assassin's Creed Black Flag spin-off. It should have been a story about pirates that featured naval warfare. And instead, it was twisted into this online, always connected, multiplayer ship fighting game. And it was like, no, that's not what people liked about Black Flag.
Yeah.
And we don't even know what's happening with that one still. And they've rumoured... what they're doing, Richie, is rebranded. It's Tom Clancy's Skull and Bones now. Yeah. And it's going to come out.
It's featuring Sam Fisher.
But then, you've got the rumour where Assassin's Creed wants to do Assassin's Creed Infinite, was the rumour where it was this connected world, which... Again, Assassin's Creed, in my opinion, is their biggest franchise, but it's their biggest franchise because it's a single-player, story-driven narrative that has had multiplayer features in the past. I honestly thought the season
I don't think the weather really took off, though. That's the thing. Some of them, I think, were well received, but it was never like... No one's buying Assassin's Creed for the multiplayer content.
Definitely not. But again, we've seen with Valhalla and stuff that they're continuing to support it with more seasonal content and more free content, which seems to work for them.
I have no issue with them like bringing out more multiplayer experiences. But for me, what they need, I think they kind of need to do both. Like, we're going to bring out some more multiplayer experiences, like a Rainbow Six Siege, like an X-Defiant. But what we're going to do is, with our predominantly single-player experiences, we're not going to try and hammer these into a multiplayer experience. What we're going to do is we're going to take what's good about it and condense it. Make Assassin's Creed a bit smaller of a game, but with a tighter narrative.
Yeah.
That's what I'd go. It doesn't need to be a 100-hour experience where you spend 60 hours just collecting shit on the map. Make it a 50-hour experience, but with that a bit tighter narrative that flows through the entire experience, and have shit to collect on the map as well.
And that's what made like the Ezio collection so good, because you loved him as a character and his reasons and stuff, and you met some of his family members, and that's when it started to kind of like expand outwards. But just looking at like the slew of games. The Division Heartlands we've not mentioned yet, but the Division Heartlands for me feels like a response to the Division 2. People are really, really enjoying this. They want to play it consistently, and they've kind of exhausted everything the Division 2 has to offer. We'll keep supporting it for an additional year, but you know what? How about just a constant connected game, free to play?
I actually think for the Division that works, because you're looking at what's working for the Division. People want to stay in this world. People still want to play in this game, play with friends, get all the clans, because the Division is effectively an MMO in some ways.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, out of those, the Division is my favourite game. So
I genuinely think that that's a decision. This makes sense for the Division. Does it make sense for Assassin's Creed? I don't think so. Does it make sense for Ghost Recon? Well, no. What you're doing there is you're creating a completely different game and slapping a brand that you already have on this. And that's where I think the
two brands, Tom Clancy's and Ghost Recon.
And that's where the negativities come from. If this didn't have that Ghost Recon title, if this was just Tom Clancy's Frontline, then 17, Frontline, then 17,000 downvotes on YouTube, it's probably 1,000. Because it's, I don't know, and then because some people who are fans of Ghost Recon go, well, this is not a Ghost Recon game.
Yeah, your expectations are set differently. It's a new IP from like a great games publisher and developer. But it is an interesting thing. You mentioned it right at the beginning about it being a business, and I completely understand where, as a business decision, making a choice to save money in shareholders and stuff, going with a brand that is already popular, it's a proven entity, it seems like a no-brainer to put money into it. But
the thing is, video games, it is a business, but it's also a creative medium. It's artwork. You're creating art. So sometimes you need to... The trick for me, I think, is balancing the two. So as I just said with Ghost Recon Frontline, it doesn't need the Ghost Recon tag in there. Yeah. If you take that out, then you're creating a new game. People look at it just on the merit of what you're showing them. You have that in, people are taking this on the merits of the Ghost Recon franchise and going, you're damaging this piece of art.
Yeah, that's a fair.
So it's like,
answer.
It's one of them where the business side is clearly won out. They went, yep, we're going to use the Ghost Recon tag on this to help promote the game, and they shot themselves in the foot by doing that.
Yeah.
So
it is an interesting thing. In a different world, we could be looking at Ubisoft Original, X-Define, Ubisoft Original, Heartlands,
I don't even
Ubisoft
mind
Original, Frontline, and just having them as like standalone IPs that exist in their own world.
Yeah, I do think having the Tom Clancy brand is a bit played out, but I don't really mind it for something like, as I said, if it's Tom Clancy's Frontline, that's fine.
And then give us a Ghost Recon game akin to Ghost Recon games.
And then keep the Ghost Recon franchise, even if you're making them less regular. Mm-hmm. Do what I suggested with Assassin's Creed. Make the game a little bit smaller. Tighten up the narrative, but have it so that everything you do feels like it's folding back into the story you're playing. Because that's what I think really gets engaging with people. If you think of any games where you've played where the story's really stuck with you, even if they are open world experiences, everything you've been doing feels like it's always funneling you back into the narrative.
Yeah, agreed. So in summary then, Richie, out of these games, which one's going to die a death?
I think Frontline's dead now.
Already? Yeah,
well, the thing is, you're off to a bad start. It's a battle royale. There's already a million battle royales out there. Is this going to be up there with Fortnite or Warzone or any of the other plethora or Apex Legends?
No.
You're entering a crowded market space quite late. When I don't know, I think it, and you're already off to a bad start on your reveal. On the reveal of this title, you're already getting slammed. I would have said before this week I would have went with X-Defiant for similar reasons, because it's just it just seems like, I think it's probably a perfectly functional game.
Yeah.
But it's a first-person shooter, multiplayer experience when there's already Call of Duty, there's Battlefield, and plethora of others.
Yeah, the thing that gets me with a lot of them is we said throughout the today's show, like the lack of, because due to the lack of single player, I feel like I just don't give a shit about the world or the characters. If X-Defiant had some kind of story mode where I got to know each of the different classes, and maybe there was one or two characters in it that were like Overwatch does it so well. They add like a hero class, like a character, and people absolutely go wild for them. And Fortnite have done it with like these random generic people who are like, one's a banana, one's you know what I mean? One's got a shark mask, and yet people love these characters. And they've done it so uniquely. But with X-Defiant, I'm just looking at generic villains 1, generic heroes 2, and yet I'm supposed to care about them fighting in this brand new world. I just don't give a damn. Whereas if you take a story in some kind of chapter beat, or give them a background or a reason for them being in these arenas, I care more. But generic Soldier Johnson, I don't care. I really don't care. And I don't care that much about the world enough. I think that's why The Division maybe does better, because I've enjoyed the story campaign in those games. So Heartlands, for me, will land with a lot more impact. But for me, yeah, it's got to be X-Defiant. I think X-Defiant is just the standout. Like I'd actually rather play Hyperscape, I think, than X-Defiant.
Yeah, Hyperscape seemed to have a bit more charm. It seemed to be a bit unique, something a bit different. I mean, it didn't land well. I didn't even realise it came out, to put it that way. But the thing I've just been thinking about, actually, is, because I am 90 hours into Persona, there's Persona 5, I'm 90 hours into a game, and I don't feel fatigued by it. I'm not bored by it, where I always am about 30 hours into a Ubisoft title. Because although these things like SideQuest and stuff, everything does fall back into that narrative. The narrative is the core of the experience, and everything supports it and lifts it. So the SideQuest, it feels like, when you go do a SideQuest, it feels like this is what the Phantom Thieves would be doing. It makes sense. It lands with the motivations of these characters I've grown to know. Yeah.
Agreed.
I mean,
how do you think Ryders Republic's going to do?
I think it'll do quite well. Because I think that, again, it doesn't have the baggage of being part of
Tom Clancy.
Tom Clancy, yeah. It's not coming out with any baggage. It's taken, I know Ubisoft have done like extreme sports games in the past, but it's taken like a load of them, slamming them all together.
It's definitely the uniquest amongst this list.
Yeah, and it's designed from the ground up to just be a playground for exploring this world and playing with these things, whatever. So I think it'll do well.
Do you think there was a conversation about adding Tom Clancy to the start of Ryders Republic?
Yes.
Like they just a poster on their ideas boards, like
Yeah.
Tom Clancy ? What? Can we get Sam Fisher in this game? Yes.
It's like when you're submitting a pitch to Ubisoft, if you work there, like the first thing on the form is this a Tom Clancy's title? If it takes yes, you get to the next stage of the pitch meeting.
Yeah,
you get a pitch meeting. If no, then you have to justify why they should give you.
Yeah, it's that meme where they were like, it's all these different races, all these different games. Like, okay, I'm not too sure. All these wonderful characters, wonderful. I'm not too sure. And he goes, Tom Clancy. He goes, son of a bitch, I'm in. just straight away, sold. Yeah, I'd love to hear about Skull and Bones. I'm looking forward to Division Heartlands. Frontline, I'm still looking forward to it. I don't think I'll play it for that long because, as with most multiplayer, X-Define, I really don't care about. Even Extraction, I'm kind of like, I'm intrigued, but I don't think it's going to be as big as they're hoping.
Things like X-Define and Frontline, if I have Ubisoft Plus, at the time when they come out, I might jump into
free,
it.
So you don't need it. It's free to play.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Anyone,
I might jump into it, but I'm not a multiplayer gamer. I'm very much open about that. But
lots of games, but so little time.
But with that, that's all we have time for you this week. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that bell icon for notifications. Check out other content such as Stadia podcasts, such as our Thursday night live streams, and any other things like press conferences we cover, because the Game Awards is coming up, and we probably will be covering it into the wee hours of the morning. So, and
it's a late one.
It is. If you want to join this discussion even further or submit a topic for us to bring to this very show, you can in our Discord server. There's a link in the description below. And with that, I've been Richie.
I've been Chris.
Thank you very much for watching. Quest completed.